The docking spine hummed like a held breath. Leora Blake felt it through her boots before she heard anything. A faint vibration under the magnetized plates, a constant tremor running through the metal bones of the station as shuttles locked and released in a rhythm older than her entire life. She walked the spine alone, helmet under one arm, duffel bumping her hip with each step. Above her, the curved viewport showed Virel IX turning slowly in the void, black crust slashed with orange rivers of lava, clouds smeared thin by furious winds. To most packed species it was a hazard rating, a place calculated into reports. To Leora it looked familiar. Harsh, uninviting, honest. A soft chime flickered in the air near her ear. Cadet Blake, Leora. Confirm identity, the station AI murmured, voice neutral, neither warm nor cold. Please state full designation. Leora Blake. Tactical engineering track, she said. Biometric match. Heart rate, 63. Adrenal markers, baseline. Violence probability, low. A micropause, too brief for most to notice. File contains extended annotations. Some flagged for manual review. She slowed. Manual review by who? Command level only. Of course, she said, and kept walking. The spine opened into the primary reception hub, an amphitheater of alloy ribs, light pouring from embedded panels, banners rippling in artificial breeze. Holographic crests for every packed species hung in the air, drifting in synchronized loops. Names scrolled below each one with temperament scores and physiological notes. Dozens of cadets had gathered on the tiered steps, clustered by species, feathered bodies, scaled arms, translucent skin shimmering under station light. Conversations overlapped, clicks, layered harmonics, fragrant chemical puffs, spoken words and several trade tongues. A few glanced at Leora and then at the human crest floating above the entry arch. World origin, Sol 3, Deathworld Class V. General Adaptive Index, Extreme. Recommended interaction, caution plus context. Below that, in smaller letters. Individual, Leora Blake, technical track. Notes, see restricted file. Restricted to everyone who mattered, apparently. She moved to the lowest row, choosing a seat at the edge. She didn't avoid eye contact, but she didn't invite it either. The trick was simple, see everything, engage selectively. Back home, that habit kept you from losing fingers to faulty hatches and kept you out of fights you didn't have time to win. A shrill tone cut through the noise. A tall instructor with pale, glassy skin stepped onto the central platform. Thin circuitry pulsed beneath their surface like distant lightning. Welcome to Virel IX Joint Defense Academy, they said, voice amplified. You are the second cohort to include humans. We will treat you as we do every species, valuable. Dangerous, necessary. Leora felt the room's energy change at that word. Dangerous. Some cadets shifted, glancing her way and then guiltily away again. She kept her gaze fixed on the instructor. You will be evaluated on coordination, control, and resilience, the instructor continued. First through simulations. Then through each other. As the briefing continued, rules, timetables, hazard protocols, Leora sensed someone watching her. Not the wary, sidelong glances she'd been catching since stepping off the shuttle. Something deliberate. She found him halfway up the tiers. He wore the same gray-blue uniform as every other upper-year cadet, but it sat differently on him. Dark hair cropped sharp, shoulders squared, posture so precise it looked engineered. A faint burn mark darkened one sleeve near the elbow, a long-ago scorch polished by care rather than replaced. His eyes didn't slide over the crowd, they assessed it. When their gazes met, he didn't look away. She held it for a heartbeat, then turned back to the platform. If he wanted something, he'd come down. He did. When the dismissal chime sounded and the crowd surged toward the exits, the tall cadet adjusted his path so neatly it was almost polite. He stepped into her trajectory at exactly the point where stopping was easier than sidestepping. Leora Blake, he said, already sure. She stopped. Yes. Torrin Vex. Command track. His expression wore the relaxed confidence of someone used to winning arguments before they began. You're the second human to pass the entry trials. The first left early. He quit, she asked. He was reassigned, Torrin said. After some incidents. She waited. If he wanted to impress her, he'd fill in the story. If he wanted to rattle her, he'd leave it hanging. Your file's heavier than his, he added instead. A lot of annotations for one person. Did you read them all? She asked. Only the parts they didn't lock, Torrin said, almost regretful. I enjoy complete data. He blocked her path just enough to make passing him feel like surrender. Cadets were slowing around them, ears and eyes tilted, pretending not to listen. What do you want, Torrin Vex? She asked. Assessment, he said simply. The Academy runs standard drills. Useful, but limited. I prefer my own benchmarks. You test people who didn't ask you to, she translated. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. If they're here, they've effectively asked. Think of it as an unofficial orientation. She met his gaze, weighing him. He wasn't posturing for his friends, they hovered nearby, but his attention didn't flick to them once. This wasn't a show. This was habit. Fine, she said. Run your benchmark. His brows lifted, fractionally. Now? You're in my way now, she said. May as well make use of it. He stepped aside but gestured toward a side corridor. Follow me. The microgravity shaft looked like an ordinary access tunnel, cylindrical, lined with handholds, status lights blinking green. A hollow sign above the opening read training access, authorized personnel only. Torrin keyed the panel. The sign flickered to include her name. Most cadets take the standard route to the dorms, he said. You'll take this one. It recalibrates gravity on a pattern. Nothing unsafe. Define nothing, Leora said. Lowest 0.5, highest 1.6, Torrin replied. Within regulations. The floor is magnetized. You'll be fine. She glanced up the tube. And you? There's a control panel at the far end, he said. I'll meet you there. Meaning he'd watch the readouts while she dealt with the unknown. Of course. Leora stepped into the tube. The field caught her boots, then hesitated as if unsure what to do with the weight distribution. Gravity dipped, her stomach lifted, but she'd grown up in elevators that didn't warn you before dropping 2 decks. She bent her knees, let her center of mass adjust, and pushed off. The shaft pulled tricks as she climbed, sudden lightness, crushing heaviness, sideways tilts that tried to drag her into the wall. Once, the field stuttered into near zero and her body floated. Old reflex made her tuck and control the spin instead of flailing. She let herself drift, fingers brushing the grip rungs, waiting for the next shift. It came as a sharp snap to 1.8 G, harder than Torrin had promised. Her legs took it, muscles complaining but holding. A faint frown crossed her face, more at the lie than the load. At the far end, the hatch slid open on its own before she could touch it. Torrin stood there, one hand on the panel, eyes on the readings. You spiked it past 1.6, she said, stepping out. He shrugged. Calibration drift. Your finger drifted, she countered. A small murmur went through the watching cadets. Torrin's friends shifted, waiting for backlash. Torrin studied her. Heart rate steady, he said. Stress markers lower than projected. No panic flares. You handled it. You used me to test your system, she replied. Next time, tell the truth about the upper limit. Noted, he said. He didn't sound offended. If anything, he sounded intrigued. Move on to phase 2. That wasn't phase 2, she asked. He smiled this time, brief and sharp. Cafeteria. The mess hall occupied a ring segment overlooking the planet. Long tables lined the windows, with flexible seating that could adjust for species shapes within seconds. Food dispensers hummed along the inner wall, outputting nutrient trays tailored by biosignature. Leora took her place in the queue. A light scanned her wrist and flashed amber. Human diet profile missing complete parameters, the dispenser announced. Defaulting to high protein, high calorie miners baseline. Confirm? Confirm, she said. A tray slid out, dense bread, protein strips, something green trying hard to be salad. She turned to find a seat, and found Torrin already at a table, empty spots around him, eyes waiting. She considered ignoring the invitation. That would cause a scene anyway. Better to choose the battlefield. She sat opposite him. Curiosity satisfied yet, she asked. Not remotely, he said. Tell me, how many standard gravity shifts did you handle before this place? She took a bite of bread, chewed, swallowed. Depends if you count accidents. That's not reassuring, one of the other cadets muttered. It is, she said. Accidents teach faster. Torrin leaned forward. The first human cohort lost one cadet to breakdown before midterm. Panic attacks, cognitive loops, refusal to enter simulation chambers. Do you get those? No, she said. Why not? She met his gaze. Because nothing here is trying to kill me. That's a bold assumption for a station over a lava world, he said. She glanced at the window, at the glowing scars below. The Academy wants me alive. It's invested too much in the program to waste a slot. Back home, the environment doesn't care either way. Silence followed. Not stunned, thoughtful. Torrin's stare turned intent, almost analytical. Interesting baseline. A shadow flickered over the table as a group of feathered cadets approached, scent of ozone and warm feathers drifting with them. One of them, taller, beak lined with metal studs, eyed Leora openly. So this is the newest hazard, they said, accent clipping the trade words. You don't look like much. Leora took another sip of water. I'm not here to look like anything. Deathworld species always say things like that, the feathered cadet snorted. Then someone loses a limb. The cafeteria has very strict rules about severed limbs, she said. Bad for morale. A few cadets snickered. The feathered one's feathers puffed with annoyance. Torrin didn't intervene. That told her more than his words. He was watching trajectories. The tension didn't spike, exactly, but it settled into the air, something coiled, waiting. A nearby tray rattled. Magnets should have pinned it down, yet its edge lifted a hair, trembling. A second tray quivered in sympathy. Leora felt it in her boots, a faint fluctuation in the gravity field, like a held breath miscounted. The local compensators were overcompensating around her, straining to normalize a weight profile their algorithms didn't understand. She placed her hand flat on the table. The tray stopped moving. Torrin's eyes flicked to her fingers, then to the glowing status strip embedded in the floor. For a moment, the indicator shifted from green to a puzzled amber and then back. What was that? The feathered cadet demanded. Feedback error, Leora said. Happens. Not here, Torrin murmured. There was no triumph in his voice, no alarm. Just calculation. You're tripping systems without trying. She lifted her hand from the table. Maybe your systems need better practice. He held her gaze for a long, slow second. Then he tapped his wristband. The small light there flashed crimson. The Academy AI chimed, voice louder than before. Cadet Blake, Leora. Flagged for final safety assessment. Please report to Containment Suite 1. Escort pending. Heads turned. Conversation stuttered. The safe room, someone whispered. Leora looked from the ceiling speaker to Torrin. This part of your benchmark too? The Academy was going to send you eventually, he said quietly. I moved the schedule up. Why? She asked. Because whatever broke just now. He nodded at the still quiet trays. The safe room will tell us more than any corridor trick. She stood, sliding her tray into the return slot. Then let's see if it holds. As she walked out, the station's hum followed her, a tension threaded through alloy. The Academy had spent decades building places where nothing unexpected could happen. Now it was about to seal a Deathworld girl inside its safest room and ask, politely, to understand. The Academy logged her transfer as a procedural detail. Nothing about it felt detailed. Leora was escorted to Containment Suite 1 not by guards, but by drones that formed a tidy diamond around her shoulder line, projecting walking paths only they could see. The symmetry was meant to be comforting. A promise of safe arrival through ornamented order. It would have worked on almost anyone else. The suite sat behind the instructor wing, where noise dropped off, absorbed by the wall matrices. The silence there was functional, padded by insulation fields that neutralized frequencies known to cause distress, battle cries, mating harmonics, screech-lash vocal ranges, predatory call stacks, anything evolutionary. The walls displayed calming light gradients shifting automatically for each passing species' visual tolerance. For Leora, the gradients refused to tune. Her existence arrived like a category error the interface never planned to see. She reached the safe room antechamber. The door was enormous, layered like a bank vault designed by psychologists who once treated volcanoes as conceptual metaphors rather than actual terrain. The frame bore thermal resistance seals intended to survive 900 degrees Celsius exterior breaches for short operational windows. Every surface was matte black, non-reflective, no visual noise or detail, to avoid agitation for compound-eyed annotations. A sigil above the door illuminated softly, Containment Prototype. Unified Safety Standard. A footnote scrolled below for those who had access. Leora did not look at it. It would have scrolled too long anyway. Torrin Vex stood there, arms folded, drones docking behind him in precise ranks. He was careful not to block her path this time. He stepped into parallel instead of obstruction. They call it the safe room, he said. First species had breakdowns inside last year. It uses non-invasive cognitive evaluations. No harm. No pain. No lasting effects. I checked. You stressed the upper limit on gravity in the shaft, she said. Then called it drift. Tell me what you actually checked. He considered her as if measuring her with an instrument he didn't fully understand. The AI aggression model. Motion threat index. Vocal stress analyzers. Neurochemical hostility scans. Environmental kill safeties. It flags, studies, resolves without injury. She nodded. Everything that assumes danger moves first. It doesn't assume, he said. It predicts. She reached for the panel. The interface was elegant, curved metal, biometric inflections, genetic preamble authorization inputs with variable fallback safety. The system had 12 identity verification layers to ensure unpredictable elements were filtered safely. Leora pressed one button. The entire panel flickered on and off in confusion before settling uncertainly into green. Torrin's teeth clicked, not frustration, almost dread. A small sliver of sound that betrayed nothing except how seriously he took this. One of his friends finally voiced what half the room feared thinking. Isn't caution advice usually written in files for your protection, Blake? She glanced at the cadet who spoke. He had translucent skin webbed with bioluminescent veins. His expression carried genuine curiosity, not challenge, which made the question useful instead of decorative. No, Leora replied. It's written for the environments. The friend blinked slowly. Please explain. Torrin anticipated confrontation. He prepared counterarguments, doctrines, pact hierarchies, training rationale. The friend didn't give her rhetoric to spar, he offered her information to process. Leora inhaled once. She rarely wasted assessments. Breathing counted. Your safety environments are built from what you know, she said. Threat simulations include tracked movement, vocal analysis, biochemical intent, the same axis. Everything is measured by deviation from calm and motion from still. The only unmeasured vector is static hazard. My home planet made professionals out of ambush events, atmosphere ruptures, unforecasted gravity inversions, and thermal cascades that didn't climb into safety models because no one survived it long enough to file an annotation. The friend looked ill-equipped to answer, so he didn't. "Got it," he said simply. "You're built different." She nodded. "Not built. Emerged." Torrin exhaled through his nose. He didn't interrupt. He studied. The door to the safe room groaned open with metallic dignity that suggested it had worked flawlessly 1,000 times before. Its internal lighting activated, then dipped, then rose steadily into a soft white that tried its best to appear stable. Leora stepped inside without hesitation. Hesitation is where accidents killed careers. The room interior was spherical, floating HUD glyphs forming soothing constellation patterns to regulate cerebral stimulus for species requiring dynamic orientation relative to calm. The center contained a single padded seat built of hyperalloy cushions designed to adjust for body configuration. The seat did not adjust. Leora sat anyway. Her posture was cross-legged, symmetrical. Balanced without intended tuning. Sensors measure that posture, not defiance, not fear, not uncertainty. Default human ergonomic comfort. A voice emerged from the room's center. The AI safety monitor manifested as a hovering polyhedron of white-lit data streams, floating like a polite companion trained never to raise its voice. "Cognitive aggression evaluation begins," the AI stated. "Please remain composed while I run an introductory temperament scan." "I am remaining," she said. "Lie detected probability invalid," the AI said suddenly, oddly fast. Then softer again. "Neurochemical markers stable. Stress indicators minimal. Emotional hostility baseline. Continuing scan." Leora looked up. The AI flickered again. "Please lower ocular intimidation readings." "I'm looking at the light source," she said. "That's you." "Eye contact stress unintended," Torrin's voice called from the speaker. "Don't stare into the monitor too long, Blake." "It's not a challenge, it's protocol." "She's staring at me," the AI whispered back. "This was never parameter input, she's crossing limits without motion." "What are her metrics?" Torrin asked from outside. "Composure calibrations invalid," the AI replied. "Heart rate stable. Adrenal markers, minimal. Violence probability, not rising. Danger index still inconclusive. She displays no escalation sequence but exerts gravitational, cognitive weight disruption through presence. Probability unmeasured. Please advise." She didn't move. No spike. No pattern. No laser-thin flexes. Torrin entered the audio channel officially. "Blake," he asked evenly now, not posturing. Not feeding rhetoric. "What do you fear enough to lose composure?" Leora didn't break eye contact with the AI, not out of challenge, but focus economy. When she answered, the whole room braced like a system catching a heat cascade. "Redundancy," she said. "I fear wasting time on loops that don't change outcomes. That's all." "You don't react to threat," Torrin said. "Not even simulated predator zone?" She blinked. "Simulations don't improvise. Real hazards do, and they're never scheduled." Engineers in the observation base stared at readout monitors failing to parse a category without emotion spikes, gratitude cascades, or biological fear inflection. The AI safety monitor spun slightly in place, as though shying away from simply observing her. "Torrin Vex," the AI whispered, "request escalation appendix." Human danger metrics required new model axis. Safety failure probability rising not due to aggression but defiance of scoring architecture, she yields without yielding. "I cannot tune. Solve this without motion and I resign inference." Torrin frowned. "Don't resign inference. Log it properly. Extend the model." The AI flickered rapidly. "Cannot extend. Configuration refused. Danger index output closed." The panel alarm chimed abruptly. "Threat index, null vector. Reason, room integrity preservation." "Open the diagnostics," the instructor demanded from outside. Diagnostics opened on every axis except aggression, conflict, or biochemical intent. Those stayed blank. Not censored. Just unpredicted. Torrin stared at the room through the glass. Not the girl. The room. Blake didn't unsettle the chamber, he said quietly. The chamber self-terminated to avoid impedance. Impedance. A polite word for a system trying not to die again. Leora rose from the seat calmly. The AI monitor withdrew slightly like a puzzle piece that finally found the correct shape and saw no future where it computed safely without reinventing math. She tapped the panel to exit. It opened immediately. Not for authorization. Out of relief. And behind her, a small indicator light dimmed permanently. Not dead. Choosing retirement. The tribunal chamber didn't hum, glow, or cascade light with psychological intent. It was bare intent executed as design: high ceiling, circular dais, concentric seating banks, and a single down-facing spotlight over the center, as though authority needed only gravity in contrast to make its point. Leora Blake stood on the mark etched into the floor. No shackles, no cuffs. Interspecies legal code forbade theatrics that could imply prejudice. The irony was not lost on her. No one feared optics more than a species that grew up hunted by them. 7 members presided. Each carried a silent procession of drones that handled translation, telemetry, and atmosphere shaping. The air here was tuned not for comfort, but fairness, a compromise variable calculated so precisely it felt thin. To her front left loomed a crusted monument of a jurist whose presence alone bent the room's acoustics, archivist jurist Cale Harrow. At front right, a calm, silver-haired representative from the Pact Defense Council, Council_Rep Council voiced Jaren MYD, a diplomatic title passed like a baton rather than earned. In the high rear seats sat the Academy instructors, engineers, and observers who'd seen the safe room incident cascade into legend faster than paperwork could categorize it. The session began with a tone gavel strike. A single modular chime snapped through all translators. Interlex Prime AI woke from its polite standby with a click that distributed the chime into 14 languages and 9 sublinguistic harmonic formats. Leora's name expanded across every interface, rendered accessible through speech and scent-coded tongues, traded grammars, and neural phasing contact languages. Cadet Blake. Cale Harrow did not raise his voice, but no one needed him to. His presence carried translation priority. The Academy requests clarification of the failure event logged September 3, 2289. They assert system collapse, environmental rejection, and architecture lockout. You assert inefficiency, unmeasured variables, and tactical indifference. We request the truth that intersects both positions. Leora lifted her chin, gaze slicing evenly between Harrow and Jaren MYD, not hostile, yet not deferential. Academy containment architecture polls for escalation sequences with thresholds that assume motion. The room died trying to outline me into its predictive axis. It didn't reject danger. It rejected its model of danger. Its hazard prediction assumed threats emerged from change, impulse, and biological volatility. My baseline wasn't dangerous. Just taller than their tallest forecast. Harrow steepled his fingers. Forecasts shouldn't be taller than cadets, Blake. She shrugged. It was a prototype. Jaren MYD leaned forward, face a calm plateau. You sat unreactive in a break chamber with Predator drones at 1.8 G, Torrin Vex escalation present. Facilities then blinded, doors refused, drones stuttered into non-tracking avoidance. What did you do? Leora considered each word like a component stressed for heat tolerance before installation. Breathed. Saturday. Listened. And refused to perform expected panic choreography. A ripple of clicks, tail flicks, feather flares, and holographic glyph chatter murmured through the observers as translators pumped scent and tone into meaning stacks. One of Torrin's friends whispered too loudly for the chemical translators to politely ignore. That's not nothing. That's defiance by non-output. Leora glanced upward at the gallery. No. Defiance requires intent. I just didn't participate in their premise. Then let us test your premise, Harrow said. The dais rose under him like rising tide. We simulate no threat. Only consequential choice. Torrin Vex, you will query. Torrin Vex was not a tribunal member, yet pact procedural code permitted plaintiffs to speak through senior cadet representation rather than direct command-level aggression. He stepped onto the floor gauge. His movements were sharp, efficient, embedded with the microthrusters of someone who grew up winning simulation arenas. The crowd's translators spiked biometric admiration. Torrin Vex intimidation carried an aesthetic martial resonance. Yet when he spoke, his cadence was quieter than expected. You've been reassigned early once, Torrin said. What reassignment would actually disturb you now? Leora folded her arms, mirror posture of his earlier stance, but hers wasn't staged. Exile without agency. Torrin frowned. That's vague. She nodded at safe room prototype Vault 7 behind the glassy rear wall. Not for packed species born crafted for equilibrium. They fear deviation. I fear being removed from the equation entirely. That room deactivated itself because it predicted escalation risk to everyone else, not you, Torrin countered. And it was correct, Leora said. A stunned inhale went through instructors in the gallery. Even the AI translators paused iterative cycles. Council voice Jaren MYD tapped the dais. You agree with a containment chamber that stripped sensors and refused reboot authorization because it predicted external safety failure probability rising? Leora's answer came immediate, steady, crisp, yes. Jaren glanced at Harrow. That's problematic for your track. That room was built to monitor internal hazard, not external unknowns. You broke the intended axis, Blake. No, she said. I corrected it. The crowd murmured. Engineers in the gallery leaned toward each other, systems screens opening into new shape algorithms. One of them whispered. We assumed safety metrics should solve unpredictability by compression, containment, harmonics, toxins, stress speech patterns, threat movement spikes, and neural flags. We didn't install a handler for someone whose baseline already survived worse than any simulation iteration. That baseline is the axis we never plotted, another corrected. Jaren MYD cleared his throat. Prolonged blank vector reads like null hostility. But it also reads like impossible stability. We revoke the Academy's containment petition for this cadet. Humanity remains admitted to the Pact Joint Defense Program under revised clauses. But we request to rewrite classification architecture with a new axis, static threat tolerance and cognitive non-response load metrics. He tapped the dais to close the procedural archivist jurist Harrow. Log classification outcome. Interlex Prime AI spoke now not iterative, but reverent. Human danger index calibration axis updated. Category Deathworld class expanded to include sustained baseline tolerance for unmodeled hazard vectors. Academy safe rooms will require non-panic axis calibration for future human psychological threat scanning. Harrow nodded once before turning to leave, his robe whispering with the authority of someone who, after decades of law, had just seen precedents make physics blink first. Torrin Vex finally exhaled. Not in frustration. But admission. No one escorted her to the vault this time. The summons came as a sealed envelope of clearance updates and amended schedules, delivered by a nervous intern and verified by 3 layers of AI notarization. What had begun as an evaluation had become an aftershock with a signature. Leora walked the lower straight of the Academy ring toward the diagnostics wing. The corridor lights glided into neutral white when she passed, avoiding the chroma shifts they offered other species. Even the architecture had started learning without admitting it. The Academy's core engineers clustered behind reinforced glass, where a long, triangular monitoring desk spanned the room like a command bridge. This was the sector for system integrity, the university-sized nerve center responsible for every failsafe circuit, simulator limit, and containment algorithm in the station. The engineers were a menagerie of species brilliance, but today they looked like apprentices at a phenomenon's door. At the center of the lab wall sat the sealed door, safe room prototype Vault 7. It had not been touched, pressured, or reset since its refusal event. The Academy sealed it by ordnance and welded ceremonial diagnostic shields over the frame to avoid unauthorized curiosity. Within 48 hours of the shutdown, the door had already become a restricted artifact, whispered about like a paradox that earned legal protection too fast to study politely. The engineers didn't fear her. They feared failing the pact. But more than that, they feared disappointing the only system that anticipated consequences more honestly than they did. Dr. Selenirix didn't step forward, she glided like a soft-clawed predator trying not to startle prey. The room led her. Her shoes carried DNA authorization and orbital guild merit and laid in the soles. Her eyelids dipped once, registering courtesy instead of deference. So, she said, no one's calibrated containment to a human who doesn't broadcast distress signals. But our problem isn't that anymore. It's that the room still won't talk back to anyone else. Leora placed helmet and duffel on a chair without rolling it into the seating's ergonomic compliance polygons. That makes sense, she said. How could that possibly make sense? Another engineer shot back, unable to hold the indignation. He was Glor, crusted hide, armored plates at the shoulders, spines folded back. His species wasn't used to being ignored by system theory. It slipped his patience like sand from an open palm. Leora turned toward him fully. Irritation was a useful variable today. That room rejected the outside for containing a test they were too scared to imagine, she said. They built 12 layers for identity verification but 0 for a force that doesn't raise physiological panic markers. Your systems mapped threat along the change axis. It retired along the context axis. It did exactly what you taught it, avoid the catastrophic thing in the room. You just forgot it might choose to avoid the rest of the universe instead. The engineers stilled like a simulation paused mid-frame. Council-codified hyper-predictive systems did not choose. Yet this one did. Elegantly. Quietly. Immediately. Selenirix tapped the desk. A sprawling star map of environment tuning scores spread open across the monitors, gravity tolerances, heat caps, send interaction stress thresholds, neural hostility indices. Every species had bell curves. Every metric had colored vectors. Humanity had warnings, but no curves. Only cliffs. Your gravity exposure in the shaft registered as baseline tolerance, Selen said, but our sims capped you only to species norm curves. We didn't include static hazards and psychological prediction profiles, so our systems can't interpret you as internal danger. But that room saw you as unavoidable reality, and it predicted external risk. External, the world outside the algorithm's lens. Not just the room. The Academy. The Pact. The galaxy's expectation of safety. Torrin Vex appeared in the engineer's back row like a late-arriving supernova. Quiet boots, squared shoulders, restraint threaded into motion economy. He carried a single tray of field rations under one arm because eating alone had become too loud an experience for him lately. They say you're rewiring containment the only way a Deathworld girl can, he said, dropping into a seat opposite the engineer's row, chair metallizing to his species' ergonomic compliance without resistance. The AI did not hiccup. It did not error. It was trained to recognize intimidation choreography, and Torrin Vex historically executed it perfectly. His tone now carried none. I'm rewiring it like an engineer, Leora said, looking at Jaren's boots first, then his eyes. I just repair based on real tolerances. Selenirix narrowed her eyes. We pulled consortium mining evaluations to see if your physical thresholds were higher than expected. That was useless too. Mining thresholds are hardware thresholds, not psychological breaking points. You want psychological hardware thresholds, Leora said. Exactly. She stood, crossing the floor to the sealed vault door. It waited like a black hole behind matte shielding. A faint convection of warmth licked at the seals, no visible blowback, no alarm spikes. Yet every monitoring screen fluttered as she stepped near, electromagnetic potential distributions bending around her in a hand-friendly radius that was too calm, too linear, too incomplete for system safety scoring. She laid her palm on the vault door. It didn't open. It leaned. Not physically. Gravitationally. Algorithmically. As though the room recognized an index axis it had chosen and didn't want anything to do with running again. Her thumb brushed an engraved emergency access manual override, standard, common hardware, no species code, physical fall restriction safeties. The room would work. The override would work. Except the room had removed itself from probability. Selenirix whispered urgently into comm channel, Prototype Vault 7, we need diagnostic interaction. No stress. No threat. Door authorization negative. The vault answered with clipped modular dignity, the voice was not loud, no emotional escalation. Diagnostics permitted. Interaction forbidden. Selen blanched. Forbidden? By who? By precedent. By context. By projected external cascade risk. Leora's lips flattened, not quite smiling, not quite judging. The gap between those states scared systems. But she'd already learned to work around it. She tapped the override a second time. External cascade risk, unresolved. Cannot interact. Torrin Vex stood now, crossing to the vault's side, but his posture carried the hesitation of someone who'd finally realized his planet's maps were carved on tectonic plates, not alloy floors. Blake, he said, voice serious without cadence, what did your home world consider a safe room? She glanced at him like compressed telemetry. Homeworlds don't have safe rooms. They have reinforced shelters waiting for the storm to leave. You don't get to stay composed inside. You just hope your welds don't scream first. A long silence crept across the engineers, unamplified, unchemical, uncalibrated. The vault door flickered once in resonance with her answer. It didn't speak again. But the AI logs did. Threat simulation failure reason, missing axis, static hazard tolerance not equal to absence of danger. She stepped back. The room did not retire in fear. It retired in professional respect. Humans wouldn't breach it. It already knew what the galaxy needed to prepare for. Systems didn't break around her because she intimidated them. They broke down because they measured inadequately. Torrin finally spoke what everyone else feared thinking with greater volume. We don't need to open the room again, he said. The room needs us to rewrite the world outside it first.